Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. We must just apologize, for some of the technical glitches that are there. We are also not able to mute, everybody. So please remain unmuted for the duration of the presentations. My name is Sivue Bangani, and I'm the Director of Research Services at Stellenbosch University Library and Information Service. And I will facilitate, the program. It's a very short program. We will begin with the welcoming and opening, which will be done by Ms. Tice, who has just spoken now. She is the Senior Director of the Library at Stellenbosch University. Thereafter, I will introduce our guest speaker, who will speak to the topic that you are aware of for 20 to 25 minutes. After that, there would be engagements, question and answers. Of course, this will be done after he's done speaking. So we will not respond to any questions while he's speaking. If you want to ask any questions, you are welcome to raise your virtual hand and speak, or you can type your question in the chat functionality of MS Teams. After we are done with all the engagements, Ms. Mimi Seyfeldrith will do the vote of thanks and closure. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll hand over to Ms. Tice to do the welcoming and opening. Thank you, Ms. Tice.
Hello to everybody. As Dr. Bangani had indicated, I am the Senior Director, Library and Information Services here at Stellenbosch University. Warm greetings to all of you joining us from various parts of the world today. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to this inaugural open access webinar, which is part of our Stellenbosch University Library and Information Services #Be Open Access Smart webinar series. Today's topic, generative AI, open access and sustainable development, the evolving role of libraries in a transforming world, promises to be an insightful discussion. I am especially pleased to introduce our facilitator, Mr. Thanos Giannakopoulos, the chief of the Information Management Section at the United Nations Dag Hammarskjöld Library in New York, a beautiful library that I had also the honor to visit when I was invited to participate in a roundtable discussion on open science a few years ago. So when I see some of the pictures, it reminds me of that. But if you have a chance to go to New York, then you should certainly try and see if you can visit the library at the UN headquarters. And I'm especially pleased. So I've also have had a long-standing connection and collaboration with Thanos, also through IFLA and other initiatives. And we are really, really pleased that he is in fact also our inaugural speaker of this webinar series. I would like to extend a warm welcome to him and express my deep gratitude for his participation. As some of you who I can see on the screen who knows me know that open access is a subject close to my heart. During my tenure as president of IFLA during 2009 to 2011, a long time ago, my presidential theme was libraries driving access to knowledge. This vision guided much of my work in strengthening library associations and advocating for the critical role libraries and information services play in open access and as a basic human right. Open access is a powerful tool to reduce information inequities, inequalities, foster transparency, and encourage global collaboration. It has tremendous potential to contribute to the creation of a more inclusive society. In my IFLA acceptance speech in 2009, I emphasized, and this is still very true today, I emphasize that information is a key input into the creation and maturation of knowledge. Therefore, a significant criterion for a growing and healthy society is access to information. I also highlighted that libraries as knowledge institutions provide spaces for information sharing and learning for people of all ages, genders, ethnicities, and socioeconomic groups, regardless of the information or knowledge needs. Access to information is essential for achieving sustainable human development, and today's discussion will reflect on the critical intersections between open access, open science, and sustainable development. The connection between open access and the UN Sustainable Development Goals for us as people, workers in the information world is evident. These two efforts are mutually reinforcing, as the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations cannot be fully realized in a world where information inequalities persist. When access to information is restricted or controlled, it deepens inequalities in education, literacy levels, gender, and access to critical services like healthcare. Equal access to information is a human right that underpins progress in all these areas. According to the complexity of the information landscape is the rise of generative AI, a technology that libraries must engage with proactively. Libraries should lead discussions on the responsible use of AI in scholarship and information services, ensuring that it enhances human creativity and support rigorous intellectual work. Now, I don't want to go too much into, and I'm sure Thanos is going to cover all of this later on. So I just want to really focus on that open access, and that to truly advance open access, we need new models and fresh thinking. Libraries and researchers must reconsider their relationship with publishers, and especially with commercial publishers. It is a dynamic that can sometimes feel one-sided, like sometimes you have when you're in a very bad relationship with somebody. I envision a future where libraries break free from these unsustainable relationships and create a more equitable scholarly communication systems. This can only be achieved when we fully embrace new models for open access. In the current scholarly communication systems, article processing charges continue to place a heavy burden on low and middle income countries. We need to strive towards a truly universal and open access model. Libraries have long been at the forefront of advocating for open access. They have established institutional repositories. They've hosted a diamond open access journals and books. They publish in open textbooks, and recently negotiated transformational agreements or transformative agreements to reduce the financial burden of article processing charges on researchers. While these efforts are notable and indeed commendable, there is still much more to be done. Libraries must continue to innovate, advocate, and educate the benefits of open access to ensure its full potential is realized. Lest we forget, these transformative agreements were supposed to be with us only temporarily. Some institutions are already negotiating and signed agreements for another 3 years. So it's way beyond 2020. They were considered a means to an end and not an end in and of itself. It was with these considerations and our unwavering dedication and concerted efforts in advancing the open access movement in mind that we launched this open access webinar series. As a community, our collaborative endeavors are instrumental in shaping the future of scholarly communication and promoting equitable access to information for the betterment of academia and society at large. So beginning in 2025, These webinars will be held quarterly. This year, we have scheduled our next one for the 21st of November, and which I have humbly agreed to facilitate. Everyone who is joining us today is invited to that next seminar. It all depends on how well Thanos is going to engage with us this afternoon. But further details will be provided in due course. And with that, again, I warmly welcome you to this inaugural webinar, and thank you for being part of this critical and important conversation. I'm handing over now to Dr. Saviwe Bangani, who will introduce Thanos and then the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tice. Colleagues, without wasting any further time, I will just introduce Mr. Giannakopoulos. He is the Chief of the Information Management Section and the Dag Hammarskjöld, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Library of the United Nations Headquarters. He has re-envisioned the UN Library as an open space for public dialogue, debate, and equitable knowledge sharing, while also strengthening the section's role as an essential component for managing the UN's parliamentary and research digital outputs. Under his leadership, the UN released the United Nations Digital Library, a central repository for the UN Secretariat, aimed at promoting permanent access to UN content and furthering the organization's commitment to the widest possible dissemination and sharing of its outputs. So hence we are talking about open, access now. In 2023, the system recorded over 60 million downloads from 12,000 locations, that's worldwide. Several other scholarly communication products and digital workflow projects have been developed under his stewardship to contribute to the United Nations information management best practices. These include a change management initiative that led to the development of the strategic outlook, that is from 2020 to 2025, and more recently to the section's updated strategic outlook, that's from 2024 to 2028, as well as a new annual series of publications, a global collaborative UN Open Science Conference, an information analysis digital workflow, a UN Grey Literature project, and a generative AI experimentation endeavor. I will not read the whole, bio. We can see that, this is an esteemed speaker, and he has achieved a lot. And, this is the right person to actually do this inaugural webinar. Over to you, sir. Thank you. Sorry, you are muted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bangani. Do you mind sharing the PowerPoint from your end? It seems that I have a little bit of a technical issue sharing it here.
Okay, Ketna, will you please do that? I send it to you.
Sent it, and I'll just say change slide, and then we go to the next slide whenever is needed. It's just as pointers to guide us a little bit in the discussion and give some background.
Okay, so I'm able to. Okay, go ahead.
So I want to say, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I want to thank you all for joining this event. And of course, I want to thank Ellen and you for inviting me to start a discussion about these topics that are very close to my heart and for which, with my colleagues here in New York, we have done, I think, quite a good number of work. I think at the moment, libraries once again are at the frontier of understanding and incorporating profound new technological innovations and directly pursuing sustainable development and permanent access to information and knowledge for all. So this is quite of a mission. But before we go into details, I just wanted to say a few things about the UN Dag Hammarskjöld Library, and which is the headquarters library of the United Nations. Next slide, please. So the library here in New York serves United Nations staff, delegates, and of course researchers and the public from around the world. We have been quite blessed with our digital outreach and with the amount of resources that we still have, despite the difficult financial situation of the organization due to the liquidity crisis. We are still managing, and we are, of course, thankful for the central budget controller, but we're still managing to continue all our operations and at the same time still be a little bit able to experiment on some of the dreams that we had and we have incorporated in the Strategic Outlook 24-2028. In 2023 alone, we have we have actually expanded our reach to approximately 25 million people and devices all around the world. We have introduced a considerable amount of unique new services, and that relates mostly to the FAQs or the online Ask DAG questions about the United Nations, the research guide we have produced, the number of research supported queries that we meet daily, and I will expand more about that. And also, of course, the metadata services that we're trying to open our metadata online. Since we started with opening the content, now our next step is opening our data and metadata online, and the library has a considerable amount of multilateral data dating back to 1946, which generations of librarians here in New York have carefully and mindfully curated up to this very day. At the same time, we're all looking forward here in New York to the outcome of the Summit of the Future, which is going to affect a lot of the plans that we have for the future. We are at a critical juncture for the organization and for the planet itself, and especially because of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a little bit behind of plan at the moment, and we need a more decisive and forceful re-engineering of the actual implementation and the mechanism that work for the implementation. Now, to this end, I think the biggest discussion nowadays, and I see that also on policymakers' level, is all the benefits of AI and GAI, and that's why I suggested perhaps this talk should be about this intersection of generative AI, diamond open access, and the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, the role of generative AI, open access to scientific knowledge, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are actually central to this transformative moment that we're going through. And I hope it's not going to be like the transformative agreements where we're just stuck with them. As institutions, libraries are still regarded as bastions of trust, learning, and access to information. And we now face a challenge of verifying the deluge of misinformation or disinformation that proliferates online while still staying true to our mission of serving the public good and providing access to credible content. And I think it is at this intersection of open access information and data, GAI evolution, and the importance of facilitating the implementation of the SDGs that I wish to concentrate today and share some thoughts and hopefully have a discussion with all of you at the end. Next slide, please. So the rise of AI, particularly generative AI, has affected the way the public interacts with information online. AI can now create vast amounts of content, automate tasks, and assist in solving complex problems. However, the very capability raises new questions about the trustworthiness of the information that GAI systems outpour onto the world. There have been cases here in New York where clients have come to the UN Headquarters Library with a request to verify a piece of information which, after careful research, my team discovered was just a fabrication. Deepfakes, on the other hand, have shown us how AI can produce realistic yet entirely fabricated audio and video, undermining society's trust in media and potentially destabilizing our relationship with truth. In this environment, libraries have a unique and critical role as institutions historically associated with providing verified and credible information. Libraries already train audiences how to identify or think more critically about information online. by offering tools and resources for fact-checking, guiding users in identifying credible resources, and educating the public on media literacy, libraries can help individuals navigate the complexities of the modern information landscape. But this mission is more than just about combating misinformation. It's also about fostering an environment of critical thinking and inquiry in general, which is the cornerstone of science. As GI continues to transform our relationship with information, libraries can evolve into centers of GI literacy or education. The United Nations Global Principles for Information Integrity, which is the newest policy that was released by the UN Secretary General, and I have all the links are available in the presentation, which we will share after this meeting, outlines and identifies principles to which we all must adhere. The principles envision an information ecosystem that delivers choice, freedom, privacy, and safety for all, in which people everywhere can express themselves freely and make informed and independent decisions. Libraries, with a long-standing tradition of providing accessible education, can lead the charge in equipping people from all walks of life with the knowledge needed to engage critically with information online. This includes not only understanding how GI tools work, but also their broader societal implications, such as bias, privacy breach, and lack of accountability. Libraries have traditionally been adhering to the UN Global Principles for Information Integrity, which are incorporated in our missions, and have programs in place that can extend these offerings to marginalized or underserved communities, including within developed nations, and striving for a benefit of GAI to be shared by all, as is the spirit of the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. The rapid adoption of these GI technologies has triggered an urgent conversation about privacy and ethics. Many AI systems, especially those driven by machine learning, rely on vast amounts of personal data. Libraries who are increasingly experimenting and in some cases adopting AI-powered tools for user recommendation and research assistance need to ensure that these technologies are used responsibly. Users' privacy must be protected, and the risks of AI-enabled data breaches, including those from third-party vendors, those who we as libraries collaborate, must be acknowledged and minimized at all costs. A pressing concern is the potential of bias in AI algorithms. I think there's a lot of ink that has been spread online and offline and print about the bias in algorithms. AI systems are trained on historical data, which reflect biases related to race, gender, class, or geography. If left unchecked, these biases can perpetuate systemic discrimination. Libraries, as institutions committed to inclusivity and fairness, can prioritize the obligation to scrutinize the impact GI tools have in society and in the communities we serve, and we know that firsthand. Transparency is key. Libraries must demand full accountability for third-party vendors that we collaborate with, full accountability about their algorithms and how their algorithms are trained, and what measures are in place in mitigating bias and potential user data sharing. Again, there are many incidents that have been recorded online on this third-party vendor leak of personal data. When we curate collections, we need to remain vigilant about how AI-driven metadata systems classify and organize content. Bias in these systems can have real-world consequences affecting which materials are deemed discoverable or worthy of attention. And this is the attention economy, of course. This can contribute to the noise of misinformation online. As we prioritize initiatives that bring diverse voices and perspectives to the forefront, we actually challenge the potential homogenization of content that GI tools may reinforce. Moreover, as AI systems require significant computational power, they are very resource intensive, and this has a tangible impact on the environment. Libraries can highlight the need for sustainable AI practices. As stewards and curators of both knowledge and sustainability, we need to champion environmentally responsible GI developments. Each question one asks a GAI model has a cost. MIT Technology Review reported that training a single AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 cars in their lifetime. The 2023 Global Sustainable Development Report, which is actually the leading report about the status of the implementation of the SDGs globally, and there is a link to this report, to this presentation, is eye-opening. And it reminds us that science-based transformations are essential to achieving the SDGs. That's true. But also responsibility for ethical AI use is one important part of this equation. Next slide. The relationship between GAI, open science, and sustainable development is, of course, symbiotic. Open science, the practice of making the scientific process, infrastructure, research results, data, and dissemination vehicle, whether that is a publication or something else, accessible to all without a subscription or a paywall, feeds directly into the capabilities of AI systems. So this relationship where we actually, the more we strive towards open science, the more we feed GI systems. Open access datasets, publications, and open code or source software provide the necessary inputs for the GI-driven research and innovation, which we want. The potential of GAI to accelerate scientific discovery is undeniable at this point. And the latter, as the Global Sustainable Development Report outlines, is the way forward, accelerating scientific discovery. GAI helps researchers analyze vast amounts of data quickly, identify patterns, develop new hypotheses. AI does assist greatly in modeling climate change patterns, optimizing new energy systems, and even developing new sustainable developments. However, for this potential to be fully realized, access to knowledge must be democratized for all, because the ethical mantra of the Sustainable Development Goals is to leave no one behind. Libraries, as data and knowledge creators, are essential in this regard. Again, the Global Sustainable Development Report 2023 points out the urgent need for inclusive science systems that bridge the gap between global scientific powerhouses and developing nations' efforts and needs to connect to the benefits of scientific advancement. Inequities in access to generative AI tools can exacerbate existing divides, creating an imbalanced science ecosystem where only a few institutions and countries benefit from AI-driven advances. This outcomes undermines the very principles of the SDGs, which are rooted in inclusivity and equitable development. As global libraries advocate for diamond open access policies, they need to ensure GAI is not just a privilege of a few, but a resource for all. Integration of AI into open science infrastructures needs to adhere to the principles of fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and usable data, and care, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, ethics. Libraries can train and be trained on promoting these open science practices and principles for data sharing, while still maintaining the verifiability, accessibility, and transparency that open science principles themselves stipulate. Next slide, please. Open access has long been the central tenet of library advocacy, and in this AI age, of course, I think it is something that we don't need to discuss in such depth. Our focus now is diamond open access, which is necessary in order to achieve the SDGs, and that is clearly identified in the Global Sustainable Development Report 2023. There seems to be a one-directional relationship between open access and generative AI, that meaning that open access offers information and data, which then GAI consumes to produce outputs. And the more it consumes, the better. So the Global Sustainable Development Report 2023 emphasizes that the transparency and inclusivity fostered by diamond open access are the key to leveling the playing field in global scientific discourse. Diamond open access, as libraries and other open science actors understand it, and I'm glad that we are together in this discussion with Ellen, who's a passionate advocate of open access as I am. So diamond open access extends beyond publications and includes data and software, as it aims to eliminate financial barriers for both readers and authors. It offers a sustainable model for opening up the record of science, allowing scientists from low-income and developing countries to contribute to and benefit from the global knowledge economy. Many rural and underserved communities globally still lack access to high-quality scientific information. Libraries have been striving to bridge this gap by offering digital resources and outreach programs that bring knowledge to these communities. And this is not enough. We need to do more. And we need to strive for diamond open access for scientific results. The value of science lies not in which journal one publishes a scientific article, but rather in what the actual article contributes to the global dialogue of science. Many scientific results still rely on subscription that exclude access to many scientific results still relies on subscriptions that excludes a significant portion of the global population from accessing or publishing essential information. This is particularly troubling when misinformation and disinformation, which is freely available online, spreads unchecked. As libraries continue to advocate for diamond open access, they are now also taking on this new challenge of having to verify information and data produced by AI tools while still continuing to curate reliable information that can stand against the flood of misinformation or misleading content. In this regard, dedicated new funds must be allotted to libraries to be able to deliver on these two new fronts. And I mentioned this example earlier at the opening of this discussion and the speech, that there is apparently now a new layer, a new overhead of our work, which is to verify information, because the public slowly understands that the output of those AI models is not yet to be trusted. Through collaborating with academic administrators and institutions, governments, and international organizations to support the broader implementation of diamond open access, I think libraries can contribute not only to the academic community, but to the public at large, fostering a more informed and engaged global citizenry. And this is yet one more component of achieving the Global Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. The pursuit of the SDGs requires not only scientific advances, but also widespread public engagement. The Global Sustainable Development Report 2023 underscores the importance of involving diverse actors, ranging from scientists and policymakers to local communities and civil society in the co-creation of knowledge. Libraries as community hubs are ideally positioned to facilitate this engagement. The many examples around the world of citizen science or community science programs at or with libraries highlight exactly this new direction that is under development. This means that libraries are active participants in science communication, becoming a vehicle to transmit to society not only scientific results, but also the scientific process. Through curating accessible, reliable, and engaging scientific content and its related processes, libraries directly assist in counteracting the wave of misinformation in science that threatens to undermine the public trust in science. And that is a very decisive and perhaps divisive thing, as the more public trust in science is corroded, the more the accelerations to science for the SDGs lags behind. It is particularly important in areas directly related to the SDGs, such as climate change, health, and biodiversity, where public understanding and action are essential. Libraries also foster direct interactions between scientists and the public, and I'm sure our audience today can attest to this every day at Stellenbosch University. Through lectures, workshops, and participatory events, you create spaces where scientists can collaboratively explain their work and outcomes, engage with community concerns, and help demystify complex topics. Now, this approach based on dialogue, this dialogic approach, not only builds public trust in science or strengthens it, but also allows scientists to gain insight into the public perspective, leading to more culturally relevant and ethically grounded research for the benefit of humanity, which is, again, one of the catalysts to achieve all 17 SDGs. Next slide, please. Looking forward, libraries now have the opportunity to harness GAI, which leverages our structured data, and also leverage our practice principles. At the same time, we have a stake in the mitigation mechanisms to combat misinformation. And the UN Global Principles on Information Integrity are intrinsically connected with the traditional principles of librarianship. And the latter have once again become ever so relevant. Read information and data critically, understand the cycle of information production and intention online, its shortcomings, and how to manage it. This is a direct action for the SDGs, as the success of every SDG is based on informed citizenry and impartial access to credible and actionable information. And I'm not going to repeat, but Ellen already mentioned the connection of this element to the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So libraries as repositories of data and knowledge, as curators of content, and as the human verification layer of information and facts that we are slowly becoming, can serve as facilitator for all these AI-driven insights that we see flowing around. We are now at a moment that collaborations and synergies are extremely necessary to experiment and introduce potential work efficiencies using GI models. Noting, however, that the latter, the GI models, are very resource intensive. I think libraries, researchers, and GI developers need to work together to create new custom insights, tools, and platforms that make sustainable development more achievable. GI has the potential to revolutionize how we track progress to the SDGs, and this should not be downplayed. It is extremely important to make sure that we track whatever happens in the global progress of the SDGs. AI-driven data analytics can help monitor and predict change in environmental conditions, track resource consumption, and evaluate the impact of policy decisions in real time. AI can help optimize resource allocation, identify inefficiencies in supply chain, and suggest sustainable alternatives and more. We need to partner with governments and organizations to ensure that these data-driven insights are accessible and scalable, that provide practical solutions for local and global challenges alike. As institutions rooted in the values of equity and service, libraries can monitor whether these AI tools are indeed accessible to all, particularly to those in low and middle income countries, or to all communities in developing nations, to anyone at the end of the day who may not have the resources to invest in cutting-edge technology implementation. Next slide. Nations of the world are gathering in 1 week. Oh, actually, not in 1 week, in a few days, are gathering here in New York to discuss about exactly that. What is the path forward? I think it is common knowledge that the implementation of the SDGs is left behind. And we need to act now. The Global Sustainable Development Report in 2023 identified that we need to use science as an accelerator to implement the SDGs. And using science connects directly with diamond open access. And of course, whether we want to or not, with this new magnifier that has come online, which is Generative AI moments, and the public sort of seems to use it quite a lot, and rightly so in certain cases. As we approach 2030, this intersection of GAI, diamond open access, and sustainable development presents us all with a transformative moment. Libraries face a set of opportunities as well as challenges. Embracing our role as curators of credible knowledge, custodians of diamond open access, and advocates of the whole suite of the open suite the open science practices, as well as our role as hubs for public engagement and citizen science, I think libraries can shape a future where information is not only accessible, but also equitable. The challenges of misinformation, privacy, bias, and the environmental toll of AI persist. The role of libraries in awareness raising, capacity building, also around achieving the SDGs, but in particular on the intersection between GAI and diamond open access and the STEM development goals, I think is more or less being established. I think now libraries can be an integral component of the mitigation mechanism, national or international, to counter misinformation and disinformation about science, about its processes, and its outputs, both online and offline. And many times in discussions here at the UN, I challenge the conception that all information is available online. I'm afraid it isn't. And we see that whenever there's a new topic that is put on the table of meetings at a high level in discussions in the United Nations, and still people sort of come to us and ask us, so what was the decision that was taken in 1970s about this or that topic? And immediately, without that decision, there's no precedent. When there's no precedent, the discussion cannot move as fast as it should. So I think that we are, and we need to put that on the table, that we're an integral component of the mitigation mechanism to counter misinformation and disinformation about science. I mean, we already see commitment to these actions from libraries around the world, especially since the global public is awakening to the harms and benefits of the current technological developments. The scientists of the Global Sustainable Development 2023 urged us to develop partnerships between all parts of society. These partnerships are needed to achieve science-driven transformations that are pivotal to SDG acceleration. Now let's bring our principles to the table and start talking. thank you very much for this, for your attention and for the invitation once again. And I'd like to close this by saying that these opinions are not necessarily endorsed by the United Nations, but mostly represent my take on the current situation of the global information ecosystem. Thank you all, and over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Giannakopoulos. Colleagues, there is a lot of key takeaways that we can take away from this. It's really a lot. I mean, I particularly like the way and enjoyed the way that you were able, to showcase or demonstrate the interaction and the relationship between the SDGs, AI, and open access, of course, which are topical, areas of interest for most in libraries these days. You did, of course, start by, showing us that the social capital, that is the trust that we have built, over the years as libraries, we can actually use it to our advantage by providing credible information to counter, loads of misinformation that are out there. Of course, you did say that in terms of our work, we attempt to be inclusive, and fair, and we do bridge the gap, between the information have and the information, rich, as well as, the global south, global north. You gave us a responsibility to advocate for sustainability, as well as, ethical AI practices that are aligned to the SDGs. There are just too many takeaways. I think I'll just, give colleagues now an opportunity to ask questions. If there are any questions, you can just, raise the virtual hand and ask your question, or you can just type it in. Are there any questions that have been typed, Kirna? Okay, I see Mr. Yusuf Ali. I hope I'm pronouncing you right. You can go ahead, sir. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Very informative. It's my comment, and my question is that how can we align the SGD in terms of generative AI in the context of education and research field? Is there any pathway, or is there any guideline to improve the research ecosystem or research intelligence, which is facing a great encounter due to the generative AI like ChatGPT, and people are not doing the research actually, but they are focusing on the ChatGPT, especially for the student. I need your comment in this regard. Thank you very much.
Did you get that question? I got part of it. Did it?
Yeah, I think I did. I think this is an academic matter, and I know that there are also counter systems that are being developed in order to track, for example, there's an issue of fraudulent science experimentation, and that also contributes to misinformation about science. So there are academic mechanisms that are being developed for that can practically be implemented in Europe, and I would suggest that perhaps some suggestion or some discussion with the research associations the research universities, academic universities association of Europe, that they are working on that type of modeling. But at the same time, I think this is again an issue of raising awareness and asking our researchers and early career researchers to think critically. We have a larger issue at the same time, which we cannot hide from at the moment, and that is the current research assessment. So there are a lot of endeavors that are being undertaken globally in terms of revisiting the research assessment. The Diamond Open Access Conference is going to have as a major component is revisiting of the research assessment, because at the end of the day, there are some early career researchers that are being told that only if you publish in Nature will you be able to get this A or B position, but not anyone can publish in Nature, and that is a financial hurdle. It's not a scientific value hurdle, but also a financial hurdle. And don't get me started on what happens from the library with this double dipping, where anyway, authors need to pay to publish, and we need to pay for certificates, all that. So I think there's an issue of research assessment that is, how do we revisit the academic research assessment? And that is the point that we need to bring this up with the faculty. We need to let them raise awareness on that, and also bring these issues back to the faculty, because all these items work against the open science suite of practices. And as far as I understand, the open science recommendation has been ratified by 193 states. Also, the open educational resources recommendation by UNESCO has been ratified by 193 member states. So governments are liable to make sure that this policy/recommendation they ratify, they read on, is implemented implemented at the national level, and of course the supranational level as well. But I think academic vigilance is important for your question.
Thank you so much. I hope that Mr. Ali would be happy with that response. Maybe I can still open, for just two more hands, short questions. There's just a short question here that says, are the reports mentioned available freely to the public from the UN website? I see Ms. Tice has a hand up as well. Maybe you can just respond to this one first.
Yes, yes, they are, and I'm now writing the address of the repository that we released, the United Nations Digital Library, where you can find everything there. So you just go, and of course, they're openly accessible to the whole planet.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Tice?
Thank you. I would just like to make use of the opportunity to do a bit of marketing for the Global Diamond Open Access Conference that will be held. Thanos had referred to that a couple of times, and I think it will be a momentous a conference that will most probably clearly set and settle this path that we should have in terms of what we want to achieve in terms of open science for the public good, as well as the recognition that without that, countries can do what they want to do, but we're not going to reach the sustainable development goals to the extent that is required. So the conference will be taking place in the second week of December this year, here in beautiful Cape Town. So we hope you will come in your numbers and have your voices heard, and particularly those of you from the global south, because again, as Thanos had mentioned, it is so critical in terms of the contribution that is needed. And then I'd just like to add also to what what you said around assessment. We hosting the International Coalition of Library Consortia here in Cape Town, and I just mentioned yesterday to them that what struck me in terms of this new vision that we need to put on the table is what the Deputy Director of the African Open Science Platform states on their website, that if we think around how we can change this, and the power that that researchers and research institutions have in terms of addressing and changing the assessment systems, because she, and I quote her here, imagine if we wake up tomorrow and universities, let's say if all the universities in the world say that they will not use and assess research based on commercial publications metrics. It's a game changer, because, and as long as institutions and as long as universities, continue to use these metrics to assess for whatever reason they want to do it. There's no need for the publishers to change. So we need to have that partnership, that understanding, and taking that power, and not to say that they shouldn't exist, but that we have to say that these are the principles on which you can continue to be in this space. Or if you want to contribute, but it has to be on the terms of the scientific communities and not on your terms. So if we can establish those terms on which we want to say to the publishers, and if the universities tell them this is what we will use, and if we can come together on that, I think that will significantly change the way that scholarly communications are distributed, and in the way that we currently work. So it's so important what Thanos said there. We can't just look at APCs and how much we charge and who charge what and how do we deal and just keep paying for that. We need to change the whole ecosystem.
Thank you, Ms. Thijs. Colleagues, we've run out of time, but I will still allow this last question because I think it's not going to take long, Mr. Thanos. It says, in terms of open access, doesn't it negatively affect library patronage, especially in the public libraries? This is from Elvis Chokwe. If you can just respond to that before I hand over to Mimi.
Yeah. So, no, I'm not of the opinion that it affects public libraries. I think the more information out there, the better. And the better for the planet, the better for the public, the better for the student, and the better for the professor, and the better for the retiree. We need access to credible information wherever we can get it. Now, if the question includes a layer of whether all open access information is credible, well, we have reached the point that all subscribed information is not credible. So I think this is a discussion that we can have on both ends of the spectrum. But also to, yeah, I mean, Ellen, that's one of the reasons I mentioned the Diamond Open Access conference, which I know is happening in your beautiful city of Cape Town. But also, just a little bit of marketing from our end. We were the first here in New York to bring open science into the United Nations. So we have been running the United Nations Open Science Conference every second year because there's only this much we can do. And we are now gearing up for the United Nations Open Science Conference in 2025. And we're already discussing several partners. So please stay tuned, and I'll be happy to pass all communications by you as well. We need the Africa Open Science Platform. We need inputs from the continent, and we need to make sure that there is an open vehicle for you to express your opinion, especially when we talk about open access. Ellen, South America model of open access, to my opinion, is much more advanced from what we see in the global north. And we need to learn from the global south on certain elements. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So basically, by making the information open access, of course, you did say it will, close the gaps between the, those who have and those who don't have. Public libraries who don't have access, to some of the databases, etc., will now be able to access those, if it's open access, and it opens more information for them to, actually access academic, information that is usually the preserve of those that are affiliated with universities and research institutes. Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. So for a vote of thanks and closure, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Mimi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So yes, thanks for everybody who participated today. And of course, from Stellenbosch University Library Information Service, on behalf of the library, very heartfelt thanks for Mr. Giannakopoulos for joining us today. And judging by the attendance, I saw we had over 180 people in attendance at some point this afternoon. I think this is obviously a very important subject, not only for librarians, but also for researchers, academics, and other colleagues of ours. So yes, I also just want to thank you for reminding us as librarians of the owners that we have. I like that you call libraries bastions of trust. And I hope all librarians can feel that they are worthy to have this important position in society. And it was very interesting to hear about not only the benefits that we, of course, know of generative AI, but also the pitfalls, such as biases and the environmental impact. And also thank you for reminding us of the importance of public engagement, citizen science, collaboration, and also the role that libraries have in bridging science and community. And also, once again, just reminding us just something simple, well, relatively simple, but I think which struck me again was that open access also provides key inputs for AI outputs. And I was just thinking of some of the work that I've been doing this morning on our institutional repository and thinking how there might even be some biases built in there in the representation of knowledge. So yes, some very, very interesting things to think about. So once again, from all of us at the library, thank you so much. And this was a very, very good start to this webinar series, and we're looking forward to future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and thanks to everybody also who joined online, and all the best.
Yes, if they could put on the photos, maybe we can take a few photos.
Just a few photos, yeah. Those who can, colleagues.
Just before everybody goes. Teresa? Can you take the screenshot?
There are very few brave ones.
Well, we see Mary and Ronette and Betsy. Okay, Teresa, you muted, so
okay, thanks everybody. You can just smile and then I'll take a screenshot, and I also just want to ask Kichne if or Mimi to also maybe take a screenshot just for a second.
Okay, great. Okay. Again,
Thank you very
much. And goodbye to everyone. Thanks, Thanos.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Ellen, again. Ciao, everyone.